Uh, Thank you, Vanessa. A warm welcome to all participants and the speakers. On behalf of Asia Pacific Adaptation Network, I'm extending my deep appreciation and gratitude to all of you for joining us in this 8th Asia Pacific Climate Change Adaptation, or in short, we call the APAN Forum webinar on catalyzing climate resilient food system in Asia and the Pacific. As we look ahead to the 8th Asia Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum, which is occurring in August 38th to 1st of September in the city of Incheon in the Republic of Korea. This webinar is the first in a series of 4, which will focus on the resilience of the food system, and I'm pleased to inform that it is being organized by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations as a lead of this stream of the forum. Many of you know that Adaptation, the forum, is the biennial flagship event of APAN and considered the Asia Pacific largest and the longest standing gathering of adaptation practitioners to share information, knowledge, and best practices in adaptation and resilience building. The network secretariat is hosted within United Nations Environment Program Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. This year's theme of the forum is Resilience for All and enabling the transformative implementation that provides needed guidance to the 8th APAN Forum as we embark on shifting and scaling up our adaptation actions within the context and the scope of our need and the resources. And I would like to just highlight the word, the enabling the transformative implementation. The business as usual, the way we are implementing the adaptation intervention is not adequate, and we need to transform the implementation of adaptation action. As we speak, the impacts of climate change are devastating our communities, the food system, ecosystem that we rely on for our livelihood, ecosystem services, and our homes and settlements. More than ever, this is the time to take careful adaptation action to address the threats and the vulnerabilities brought by changing climate. As a lead up to the 8th APAN Forum, this pre-forum virtual dialogue webinar will gather the perspective from the various stakeholders across the Asia Pacific region on the themes on the resilience. And we'll be focusing today on the food system, but the other 4 will be focusing, or remaining 3 will be focusing on the communities, the cities, as well as the ecosystems. Outcome of the pre-forum webinars will feed into the overall program of the main forum. Furthermore, it aims to foster a mutual understanding of the recommendations for accelerating transformation towards the adaptation and the climate resilience. At this juncture, it is my also great pleasure and honor to introduce our FAO colleague, who is the Senior Resilience Officer in FAO's Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, based in Bangkok. Welcome, Han. And let me just provide a brief introduction of my fellow colleagues from FAO. She leads the organization Climate Change and the Resilience work in the region. Prior to joining FAO, she worked with the United Nations Office for the Disaster Risk Reduction in the Regional Office for Asia Pacific, and served during the 2010 to 2016 as the focal point for Southeast Asia and engagement with the parliamentarians and the local governments in the disaster risk reduction work. Between 2007 to 2010, she coordinated the River Basin Development Planning at the Mekong River Commission in Vietnam and was based in Laos. For more than 15 years, she worked for UNDP in Vietnam as a program officer and focal point for the disaster risk management and supporting the poverty reduction and social
I think Babu experienced some glitch. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you very much, Babu. So I join Babu in welcoming all of you in this webinar, and thank you for spending time with us today. So as many of you may know or sense, climate change is the biggest threat to food security and nutrition in our regions, Asia and the Pacific, and it's causing a range of impacts and shocks in the food system that affect all dimensions of food security, being availability, access, utilizations, stability, and sustainability of food. So some of you might also have seen the 6th assessment report of the IPCC that highlights that climate impacts on food system are growing at the scale and magnitude that our adaptations actions are not compatible. So the report also emphasized the importance of integrated approach to achieve multiple objectives in building resilient food systems. Resilience is also the most common topic in the dialogues towards the United Nations Food System Summit in 2021. And many national pathways for food system transformation from countries in our regions highlight resilience to climate change, multiple disasters, and socioeconomic shocks as so vital for food security, sustainable livelihood, as well as sustainability of our ecosystems. So resilient for food system, as Babu mentioned, is one of the 4 thematic streams of the upcoming APAN Forum, which notes that resilience required our action across 5 enablers: policy and governance, planning and programming, science and assessment, technologies and practice, and last but not least, finance and investment. So on our road to the 8th APAN at the end of this month, this webinar will build on the momentum of the stock taking of food system transformation action that just happened last week in Rome to share the success stories, our lessons learned and insight to help catalyze transformative actions in building the resilience of our food systems in the regions. And in doing so, we hope to foster a common understanding of key challenges, opportunities, but more important, solution for further discussion at the forum and to accelerate our actions toward greater resilience for all. With that, I turn over to my colleague, Michael O'Malley, who is serving the facilitator of our section today. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hang. Next slide, please, Vanessa. So, thank you, and the next one as well. So as Hang noted, our objectives today are to share success stories in strengthening food systems resilience in the region, such as through policy or technology innovations or regulatory and investment frameworks that support transformative actions. Also, to identify and discuss key challenges and opportunities to scale up transformative actions for food systems resilience. And finally, to invite your perspectives, all of you joining us here today, as we look ahead and build momentum toward the APAN Forum. Next slide. Our agenda includes an opening keynote from Sridhar Dharmapuri, Senior Food Safety and Nutrition Officer in FAO's Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, followed by a brief presentation on the outlook for food systems resilience in the region. We will then hear from our featured panelists who are leading food systems transformations in their countries, after which we will invite your perspectives and discussion of key issues and opportunities. Next slide. So with that, it is my true pleasure to introduce our colleague Sridhar Dharmapuri, who works with countries and regional bodies to strengthen food systems in Asia and the Pacific to improve food security, nutrition, and resilience to climate change, urbanization, and other key challenges. Prior to joining FAO's Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, Sridhar led FAO's largest ever food safety projects in Bangladesh, assisting the government in its food control system and building technical capacities nationwide. He is a PhD biologist with more than 20 years of international experience, including 10 years in the private sector working to develop drugs and vaccines against cancer. Sridhar, we are delighted to have you with us today, and I turn it over to you for your keynote remarks.
Thank you, Mikhail, and thank you to everyone in APAN for inviting us to speak here today. And my attempt today would be not just to not to do, in fact, a full keynote, but actually to set the scene for what we will discuss on climate change, resilience, and adaptation in agriculture, and share with you what happened at the UN Food System Summit +2 stock-taking moment, which took place a week ago in Rome from 24th to 26th July. I was there along with a number of my own colleagues, and we had the opportunity not only to hear from a vast number of high-level people, especially the top leadership from many countries and globally, but also from a number of practitioners and experts in various fields who have a very good knowledge of food systems, not only overall at the global level, but at the regional and national level. And I can see that some of them are there as panelists today, as well as are in the audience. So I'm very happy to share what we gained from last week's stock-taking moment. And of course, we are also here to learn from all of you on what else as FAO and as part of the APAN Forum we can do better. So just to cast your mind back, about 2 years ago in September 2021, we had the UN Food Systems Summit in New York. And remember, that was in the midst of this unprecedented COVID pandemic crisis. And at that time, the Secretary General's call for action based on the 5 action tracks on which the summit was actually based, where the action points were to nourish all people, to propagate and encourage nature-based solutions and nature-positive modes of for food systems, to encourage sustainable and equitable livelihoods, decent incomes, and empowerment of communities, to build resilience to disasters and crises, and to accelerate the means of implementation. And of course, this means of implementation is an important message for all of us who are here today. Since then, of course, we have seen how the situation all globally has not been very positive. Not only did we have the pandemic that was followed by the crisis resulting by the war in Ukraine, and all this is happening in the background of the existing poly-crisis, as we call it, that of environmental pollution, of a loss of biodiversity, and of course, in the light of the issues related to pollution. So in this background and the continuing crisis of climate change, which I think you will all discuss further and go in depth today from all the speakers. So what you can see here is that over the last 2 years, there has not been much motivation, let's say, or much fiscal space, as well as any other concerted effort to move towards efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable food systems, because most countries have been extremely concerned about the impacts of these crises or the immediate impacts, and therefore have responded accordingly to ensure food security and nutrition, as well as livelihoods for all their populations. So this stock-taking moment was a chance as an opportunity to reboot the commitment to food systems transformation, and to especially look at what are the steps now needed over the next few years, because countries and the world in general cannot keep having short-term solutions to crisis. Eventually, we need long-term solutions so that we are resilient and shock-proof going forward, because the shocks and stresses will keep coming. It's more about how we're able to transform the system holistically to be resistant and to be shock-proof in the long term. So in this slide, we actually had global leadership at the UN Food Systems stock-taking moment. We actually had the presence of the UN Secretary General, the UN Deputy Secretary General, the presidents and prime ministers from many countries, notably from the Asia-Pacific region. We had the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, the Prime Minister of Nepal, the Prime Minister of Fiji, and a number of ministers from this region who attended and spoke especially with passion about the need to look at long-term transformation of food systems rather than just look at short-term response. And all this is happening continuously in the light of the fact that the food security and nutrition situation continues to be of great concern. So in the first week of July, FAO released the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World for 2023, and the Asia Pacific report will be released very shortly in about a couple of months' time. So about half of the undernourished, or the total number of undernourished, which is about 735 million, about half of them are in Asia. This is a slight improvement from about 2% since 2021, but you can see it's really not enough. 50% of the population of the undernourished are still in Asia and the Pacific. And more than 23% of the population here face either moderate or severe food insecurity. At the same time, the mitigating factor for undernourishment, which is healthy diets, are among the most expensive anywhere in the world. In the Asia Pacific region, they cost about $4 per person per day. And you can imagine that's unaffordable. Even for many of us, that would actually be quite unaffordable. So therefore, in this background, we actually are faced with the situation that food systems need to be reimagined and reshaped. Overall, following the process of the UNFSS, about 120 countries have submitted their food system transformation pathways to the Secretariat, the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub, which is based in FAO headquarters, of which about 107 also submitted what are called as voluntary monitoring reports, just to show what are the kind of steps that they have taken in meeting the commitments that they made in 2021 and what they intend to do in the future. Well, overall, from the Asia Pacific region, about a quarter of these were submitted. So we have about 25 pathways and around the same, about 16 to 17 voluntary monitoring reports on what they have done on food systems. So clearly there is an appetite, both political, economic, and social, for transformation of food systems. And that is actually being further fed because of the crisis that we all are currently facing, all countries in the Asia Pacific are facing. Clearly also, as has been made, the point being made by ESCAP for some time now, that the region is significantly off track towards the SDGs, and in the Asia Pacific region is not expected to achieve them before 2065. So that clearly has made it almost, for us, seemingly an unachievable goal unless we make certain changes, and particularly in food systems. Therefore, overall, and it's also well understood both at the summit and the stock-taking moment, that climate change or mitigating climate change, tackling it through adaptation, mitigation measures, and through resilience is critical for food and agriculture. If we are to meet the food and agriculture requirements for the population that there will be in the years to come, and if we are to avoid the kind of impacts that we are seeing right now, the El Nino effect, and as well as even in Rome, when we were there, temperatures reached a record high of 43 degrees. So that itself was a message to all the participants that how much action actually needs to happen on the climate change front. So the action points that resulted from the stock-taking moment, which were then articulated by the Deputy Secretary General when she closed the session, was one, to incorporate food system strategies into all national policies for sustainable development. So this, in a way, has brought back food into the center of the global development agenda. So it's no more just about economic growth or chasing GDP percentages, but it is about actually bringing food and sustainable food systems into the center of our existence, establishing food systems governance that engages all sectors. And here's where the engagement means bringing in all parties and participation from everyone, including women, young people, indigenous people at the local level, with knowledge sharing, cross-sector programming, knowledge exchange. Investing in the research, data, and innovation and technologies are critical. And of course, that is something most of you who are here today would know this very well, the importance of science and technology in tackling the impacts of climate change. The increased engagement of the private sector is also seen, which has also been always been considered important, but is now more important than ever because food is largely in the private sector. So food systems cannot be reshaped or imagined without that partnership, and ensuring access to finance at concessional rates, both short-term and long-term. And this is also emphasized repeatedly by FAO and other organizations, the need for an import facility, which would help countries, particularly in times like this, when there's both a debt crisis as well as a food price rise crisis along with the fuel price rise. So all these need to be operationalized. And there would be a stock-taking mechanism also for the lesser developed countries. So overall, the summit actually discussed not just at a higher policy level, thanks to the global leadership, on the key issues arising for food system transformation, the need for it, the need for urgent action, but there were a number of side events where all the participants, regardless of whether they were from universities, from research institutions, the private sector, civil society, all shared significant knowledge as well as advances that they had made in various food system transformation actions. So those were the real, where a lot of the technical advances that have been made over the last 2 years that were shared. And I think some of these are captured in the UN Secretary General's report, which is on the website of the UNFSS. So you can watch that, you can read that at your leisure. The important thing that I just wanted to emphasize as I conclude my presentation was that at the stock-taking summit, there was a realization that progress in sustainable development is really not possible without taking concrete steps in food system transformation. And we are pretty sure this is going to come up again in less than 6 weeks' time when the countries meet for the SDG summit in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. So pretty much food system transformation is the focus of development agencies over the next few years and probably decades. And in that context, whatever actions that this group takes in encouraging or in mitigating climate change, impacts of climate change and adapting to it, that would be most helpful. So I would like to conclude here now, and I look forward to hearing from all of you, your experiences and any advice that you could give to agencies like FAO. Thank you very much, and back to you, Miguel.
Thank you so much, Sridhar, for those very critical updates from the Stock-Taking Summit and also challenges and progress more broadly toward transforming food systems, which is very helpful for our discussion today. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So we would like to now provide a brief presentation on the outlook for food systems resilience in the region as a further basis for our discussion. As Sridhar and Hong both highlighted, climate change is the biggest threat to food security and nutrition in Asia Pacific, which is home to 6 of the 10 countries most affected by climate change over the last 2 decades. And as Sridhar noted, Asia is also home to half of the people facing hunger, with 55% of the world's undernourished people. And exposure to climate and other hazards such as epidemics and conflicts puts more than half of the region's countries at very high, and medium risk of disasters and humanitarian crises. Next slide. And we're seeing the impacts of climate change now causing a range of shocks in the region's food systems, as shown here in this graphic from the IPCC, illustrating linkages between the climate system, food systems, ecosystems, and socioeconomic systems. And food systems in turn are influencing the climate system through greenhouse gas emissions from food production, processing, distribution, and consumption, and through the degradation of terrestrial and marine environments that support climate regulation. Next slide. As Sridhar noted, in 2021, countries convened at the United Nations Food Systems Summit and committed to transform food systems, recognizing 5 key capacities of resilient food systems to anticipate, prevent, and absorb impacts from shocks, to adapt to evolving risks, and to transform in cases where current food systems are no longer sustainable. That summit highlighted that resilience also requires a clear understanding of the specific food system context for targeted solutions that can be operationalized, as noted in this slide. Next slide. A range of challenges continue to limit progress toward resilient food systems in Asia Pacific and globally, however, with just a few illustrative examples shown here, each associated with the 5 enablers that have been identified for the APAN Forum. As Hong mentioned, policy and governance, planning and programming, science and assessment, technologies and practices, and finance and investment. And again, this is just an illustrative list as context for our discussion, so I will not read through each of these, but rather, next slide. We would like to highlight a few opportunities to support transformative actions related to each of these enablers, such as supporting national pathways for food systems transformation, as Sridhar highlighted. Through these pathways, governments in the region have prioritized climate change and highlighted resilience as vital for food security and sustainable livelihoods. Many of these pathways also emphasize promoting vulnerable people, women, girls, and youth food systems, and drawing on indigenous knowledge and experience as key game changers. Next slide. Also related to policy and governance, countries in the region are working through the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network and its negotiating group for agriculture to engage with international frameworks such as the UN climate change processes and to help implement national commitments for food systems resilience. The ASEAN Climate Resilience Network provides policy guidelines for climate smart agriculture, public-private partnerships, gender mainstreaming, and other key opportunities. And through a GCF readiness grant, it is spearheading implementation of the Coronivia joint work on agriculture and supporting the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work program to scale climate action. The network is also developing carbon neutrality and other strategies for the agriculture and land use sectors, helping countries to address both climate mitigation and adaptation objectives systematically. Next slide. Related to planning and programming, many countries in the region are scaling up climate ambition in agriculture, land use, and food systems, including through their nationally determined contributions, national adaptation plans, and related programming. And some countries are also using foresight and scenario approaches in their planning and have established monitoring and evaluation systems for climate adaptation in the agriculture sector in order to provide more insights to support programming. And as noted here, Cambodia, Mongolia, Nepal, and Thailand are participating in an ongoing SCALA program co-led by FAO and UNDP, which will provide strategies and learnings to support countries more broadly in the region in translating NDCs and NAPs into transformative solutions. Next slide. Related to science and assessment, countries in the region are leveraging next generation agromet services, which combine digital technologies and agrometeorological advisories to help farmers manage climate risks and make more informed decisions. The Laos Climate Services for Agriculture, for example, provides forecasts, recommendations, and early warnings on a weekly, monthly, and seasonal basis, which have helped more than 85% of farmers interviewed to change their farming practices for greater resilience. And FAO is now extending this support to other countries in the region and also working with partners to facilitate development of a regional investment roadmap for agriculture climate services in order to help stimulate further investments in this critical area. Next slide. Related to technologies and practices, countries in the region are piloting and using a range of resilience building technologies, a few examples of which are shown here. And if adopted at scale, these and other technologies can help to catalyze transformative change. Inclusive planning is critical, however, to ensure that smallholder farmers, women, youth, indigenous communities, and vulnerable populations have access to and equitably benefit from these and other resilience building technologies. Next slide. Many countries are also adopting an anticipatory action approach to protect their food systems and safeguard livelihoods before disasters occur, with some examples noted here in Vietnam and Mongolia. And this approach establishes a connection between early warnings, proactive measures, predetermined delivery mechanisms, and financial arrangements in order to minimize harm and losses. And cost-benefit analyses show that for every $1 invested in anticipatory action, it yields up to $7 in benefits and prevented losses for families. And this realization has caused a fast-growing momentum for anticipatory action as a transformative approach for resilience in ASEAN, in the Pacific, and elsewhere in the region. Next slide. Related to finance and investment, this slide highlights both the need and the opportunity to scale up climate finance in the agriculture, forestry, and land use sectors, which currently receive less than 3% of global climate finance. And while many international finance institutions, donors, and countries have committed to increase climate finance for the sector, aligned support from all partners and stakeholders will be very essential in this effort. Next slide. There is also a need and an opportunity to repurpose current governmental support to agricultural sectors, nearly 90% of which globally is either price distorting or harmful to the environment and people's health. And so urgent action is needed to phase out the most environmentally harmful support and to redirect it toward investments in climate smart food production, research and development, innovation and infrastructure to transform food systems for greater resilience. Next slide. And this can also help accelerate blended finance solutions, combining public and private capital to de-risk investments, provide transition finance for small-scale farmers and businesses, and to enhance coordination between public and private investors and local financial institutions. As an example, the Sustainable Rice Landscapes Initiative and the Global Environment Facility are supporting a new blended finance facility for climate resilient rice farms to be piloted in Bangladesh, Cambodia, and Vietnam, with a focus on the funding needs of farmers, businesses, and governments. Next slide. So in conclusion, we are very happy to see increasing commitments to transform food systems in the region and increasing investments in resilience, with governments, partners, and stakeholders all working together to share knowledge and best practices and to overcome challenges. And up next, we are very honored to have with us 3 distinguished panelists who are leading food systems transformation in their countries and globally to share their perspectives and experiences with us on these key issues. Next slide. So with that, it is my pleasure to first introduce Ms. Marissa Cook, joining us from Nauru, where she serves as the Director of Agriculture in the Department for Environmental Management and Agriculture. Ms. Cook has led national dialogues and processes for food systems transformation in Nauru and is a key leader in the region more broadly, sharing her extensive knowledge, experience, and valuable perspectives to help other countries, partners, and stakeholders in transforming food systems for greater resilience. Ms. Cook, we are deeply honored to have you with us here today, and we welcome your insights, such as on how Nauru is implementing its food systems pathway, and any successes, lessons learned, or challenges that you have encountered or overcome, which can perhaps help other countries along similar paths. Ms. Cook, we turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mikhail. Can you hear me? Thank
Yes,
you.
we can.
Từ bakar the bonibe the gunam yodagin quad me arme yakame, Kongawanum, Kakitao Jano, to the webinar, a Pangabina ran, Ojakameo, the bakar. Distinguished participants, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Omoyeko and Ekamowood Omoyakami Mina. Warm greetings to you from my superiors and my beloved country, Nauru. I wish to thank the APAN organizers for this invite and to give Nauru this great opportunity to speak and share our story at this pre-forum webinar. It is indeed an honor. I have been asked to speak about Nauru's National Food System Pathway, NFSP. The NFSP was informed from the outcomes of national dialogues after the UN Food System Summit 2021 and is aligned with policies and frameworks that have existed as well as current, Similarly, I trust that the reason for a national food systems pathway is to improve the performance of the national food systems as well as to guide us and keep us stay on track. Moreover, to ensure that country members meet the UN long-term goal and its 2030 target. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we have 7 years more to go. If you ask me if Nauru is on track, I would say yes, we are. According to our NFSP, and we can do a national space to achieve what we must. We all know that we have encountered much challenges and shocks and stress due to climate change and pandemics. Recent is COVID-19 that made the whole world to a standstill. Nevertheless, we continue to strive and overcome. There are lessons learned from every country being for the COVID pandemic, and what we have achieved, even though there were failures, we continue to overcome. In the eyes of God, nothing is impossible with him, but we also have to do our part, working with God and working alongside with each other and supporting each other no matter what. In my view, there is nothing wrong if we are behind, as we can only do so much, one day at a time. We expect the UN to understand the same, the traumas and hiccups and what have not, that each country is facing is unpredictable, and no one knows what lies ahead in the future, but we can only predict and put our trust in the Lord. In our NFSP, there are 4 main priorities spotlighting our NFSP. Let me share my story in brief. Hopefully, you will pick up and learn from it the same. There are a number of game changers for each of the main priorities and have selected one for each. 1, increasing nature positive production. At the last UN Systems meeting in Bangkok, Nauru mentioned that it has developed and promoted breadfruit as Nauru's staple food, addressing food security and healthy livelihood. Between 2021-22, 4 acres of land was established to plant breadfruits and other crops, fully subsidized by our government. With the manpower of our agriculture team, 21 breadfruit suckers have been planted. That includes root crops, cassava, taro, and pineapple and pumpkin. Fruit trees such as banana, citrus, lime trees, local tall coconut trees have planted alongside the main road to protect the farm from the sea breeze. The farm is about 50 meters from the sea. Our application for Nauru's One Crop, One Product, OCOP, was approved by FAO, including financial support in total Australian dollars 32,754,000. And we have only 5 months left to roll out the activities until December 2023. Letter of agreement between FAO and DEMA, Department Environmental Management and Agriculture, is being drafted and is at its final stage. 2, advancing equitable livelihoods. Gender inclusion, a strong emphasis is placed on gender for the inclusion of women in agriculture. We have extension services to increase productivity tailored to everyone's needs to promote equitable labor in food production. We have recruited 14 extension officers to assist growers in the 14 districts for backyard kitchen garden. Free seedling distribution, 1,000 seedlings a month and 100 compost bags is given out to growers on a monthly basis. These are green vegetables, short-term for household consumption, all at a small scale. Growers are encouraged to sell the fresh produce to the community if so wishes. This activity continues and the number of growers continues to grow as well. 3, building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks and stress. Land rehabilitation is important to build resilience in Nauru and fundamental to improving the sustainability of food system through improved production and reduced carbon sequestration to mitigate against climate change. As our population continues to grow, we also need more arable land to produce more food. Our government has taken the lead to launch the Higher Ground initiative, not only to boost nature positive production, but to facilitate the migration of people and critical infrastructure away from the coastal areas vulnerable to sea level rise. Restoring arable land in Nauru's focal strategy to achieve food systems transformation nationally, to prepare our people and future generation for the unpredicted future. We don't want our children to continue to depend on imports, and it is our responsibility that this is fulfilled. We are seeking partners to help bring in the expertise, resources, and inputs that will enable Nauru to scale up food production significantly through the Higher Ground Initiative, HGI. Is there anyone out there willing to assist? 4, strengthening enabling environments for food system transformation. Strengthened policy and legislative framework is one of our game changer, is to strengthen policy and legislative framework. Example, formation of an agriculture sector partner group, steering committees yet to be finalized, as there are too many working groups being established for various projects. And so this is a bit fragmented, I would say. This pathway is yet to be transformed better. And in conclusion, I believe you would have already picked up from my story some successes, opportunities, key barriers, challenges, without having me to dwell on. In this case, we'll learn from them, and it will be the same for you with your pathway. The National Food System Pathway Plan is a document that guides our food systems. It is not only congruent with your National Sustainable Development Strategy, your National Agriculture Strategy, your framework for climate change adaptation and disaster risk adaptation, your relevant sectoral strategies for food and nutrition security, environment, natural resource management, gender and social inclusion, tailored to suit your national food systems and the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, but to keep us to stay on track. Lastly, let us keep in mind the great support from our donor partners, local partners, our community, our frontliners, and of course, our governments. Without them, we won't be able to move forward in anything. They are the backbone of everything that we wish, we want, we need to accomplish to achieve a food systems pathway. Food is everybody's business, leaving no one behind. Thank you for listening, and blessings and peace to you all.
Ms. Cook, thank you so much for sharing this very helpful update on your National Food Systems Pathway and your successes, your challenges, and lessons learned. All incredibly valuable for our discussion today, as well as your inspiring and encouraging remarks. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure now to introduce Ms. Mercedita Sombia, Undersecretary of the Policy Planning and Research Office in the Philippines Department of Agriculture. Ms. Sombia previously served as Undersecretary of the Regional Development Group of the National Economic and Development Authority, and prior was affiliated with a number of international and local research organizations working to develop the rural economy and to strengthen the agriculture sector for greater resilience against climate change and natural disasters. Undersecretary Sombia, we are very honored to have you with us today, and we welcome your insights on the Philippines food systems pathway and any successes, lessons learned, or challenges you have encountered and overcome in working to implement it. So over to you, Undersecretary Sombia.
Thank you, Mikhail. Good morning to everyone, to all the listeners in this event. Good morning to all. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting the Philippines, the Department of Agriculture in particular, to share how we are trying to move to transform our food systems and to enhance our resiliency against climate change. This all started, when after our participation in the UNFSS in 2021. So we started to, craft a national agriculture and fisheries modernization and industrialization plan, 2021-2030. And the approval and adoption of this NAFMIP is a testament to the Philippines Department of Agriculture's unwavering commitment to a holistic food systems transformation in support of the global movement to launch bold new actions and solutions, leveraging on healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable food systems towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. Espoused in the NAFMIP are comprehensive strategies that reflect our reoriented approach to agricultural development, which goes beyond the myopic approaches to solving food security, sustainability, and nutrition challenges. It is anchored on the agri-food value chain and commodity systems and employs integrated spatial planning, among other key innovations. It is framed by the integrative food and nutrition security paradigm, which builds upon the United Nations food systems and the Philippines food security development framework. This 10-year strategic and directional plan for transformation of the Philippine agriculture aims to inspire a coordinated, cohesive, and determined effort from a wide range of stakeholders. It seeks to mobilize sector-wide public and private investments and resources to support the goal of food and nutrition secure and resilient Philippines with empowered and prosperous farmers and fisherfolk. It aims to enhance income and livelihood opportunities in rural communities through sustainable and resilient agri-fishery industrialization and modernization. The NAFMIP encompasses a whole range of initiatives for holistic development across environment, people, inputs, processes, infrastructure, and institutions. Likewise, it highlights the critical linkages that relate food production and utilization, harvesting, packing, processing, transport, marketing, nutritious food consumption, and food remains disposal to the attainment of higher socioeconomic and environmental outcomes. The NAFMIP serve as the key reference in the formulation of agriculture and fisheries-related chapters of the Philippine Development Plan 2023-2028. With this, we are more assured that the sectoral actions and outcomes are aligned and contribute to the national development. Specifically, the NAFMIP guided the crafting of these key strategies in modernizing agriculture and agribusiness through holistic agri-food system measures and ensuring food security and proper nutrition. The accompanying regional development plans are also aligned with the Philippine Development Plan and NAFMIP. In light of the impending devolution of national government functions in the Philippines to the local government units, we also aim to cascade and translate the key strategies in NAFMIP to local development plans to ensure the harmonized implementation of government programs and support services in agriculture and fisheries across all levels. Coherent policies, impact investments, and strong institutions will be just as important in our journey towards the envisioned transformation of the agri-fishery sector and the entire food system. The NAFMIF also considers the interconnections between environmental changes due to agricultural activities and climate change that aims to address natural resource depletion and agrobiodiversity losses, among other concerns. By integrating natural resources conservation and sustainable agriculture and fisheries systems, innovations are grounded and integrated spatial framework. We cannot talk about food systems transformation without tackling how to build its resilience. When it comes to agriculture, a sector crucially dependent on a climate for its production, the effects of disasters, extreme events, and climate variability are often grave and far-reaching. Beyond the physical damage, it can also have a wider impact on agricultural and food production systems that derails sector growth and resonate across national economies. While the most direct impact is to reduced production, its repercussions cascade along the entire value chain, affecting the agricultural growth and rural livelihoods and placing all dimensions of food security and nutrition at risk. To help build the resilience of food systems, we will continue to harness the power of digital technology in generating, disseminating, and applying science-based decision support tools that will serve as basis for effectively managing climate risk, ultimately building the resilience of agricultural communities and the agri-food systems, as well as the livelihood of households and individuals that depend on it. Thank you, Mikel, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary Sombia, for such a helpful update on your national food systems pathway, your successes, and your key strategies, including to actualize the pathway's objectives and local development plans in order to build and foster food system resilience in the country. Those are such key steps that all countries, I think, are working to take. So your sharing with us is very valuable for our discussion today. So thank you so much. It is now my pleasure to introduce our third panelist, Ms. Imelda Bakudo, Senior Advisor for Food Systems to the COP28 presidency, joining us today from Abu Dhabi, where she is working to ensure alignment of UNFCCC agreements related to food systems with the COP28 presidency's initiatives. Previously, Ms. Bakudo worked for a decade as Senior Advisor to ASEAN and its member states, helping to strengthen regional and international policies for resilient, low-emission food systems. She has also been instrumental in guiding the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network and is a leading force behind the ASEAN Negotiating Group for Agriculture. Ms. Bakudo, we are delighted to have you with us here today, and we welcome your insights on key opportunities for food systems resilience, including as related to planning for COP28. Over to you.
Good morning, Michael from Abu Dhabi, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's so good to participate again in the Asia Pacific Adaptation Network events and to interact with some of our colleagues from my previous incarnation. Sitting in Abu Dhabi where temperatures has reached record-breaking points in being super hot. Let me share my screen. Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to share the climate agenda for food system of the UAE COP28 presidency. All right, there you go. I would like to say that there are so many priorities of the UAE presidency, and it has highlighted food system and agriculture and climate action within this sphere as its priority. It's believing that, food systems must transform to tackle climate change, through emissions reduction and through resilience building to ensure food security. Here's some of the figures that I think most of our experts in this panel and those listening are quite aware. There is contribution to emissions from our sector, from food systems, from global emissions to global deforestation driven by agriculture in order to produce for food security. And 70% of species are at risk of extinction. There are 735 million people still suffering from chronic hunger, and the list goes on. Crop yield decrease, including decrease in maximum catch potential of marine and aquatic fisheries in low emission scenarios by 2100. So the UAE presidency has looked at this as a problem statement and has devised several programs in order to approach climate action within food system. Simply put, the UAE presidency believes that to achieve the Paris Agreement targets, we really need a holistic food system transformation and approach. How we have done about in having this food system approach or framework that was launched actually last week by Her Excellency Mariam Al-Hamieri from UAE through the Food System Summit in Rome, and was probably received quite very positively. And so this food system approach I'm sharing with you that we have unveiled at the Food System Summit last week in Rome was a result of a broad consultation with so many, I think, probably thousands of stakeholders of agencies involved in both agriculture, food system, and the climate space. And it's governed by principles of aligning with the broad theme of the Paris Global Stocktake, having ambitious approach that things that haven't been done before, focusing on systemic change and not just one-off events, focusing on both national and non-state actions, and aligning with the UNFSS stocktake process that took place last week in Rome, working closely with Dr. Agnes Kalibata, and aligning with UAE's domestic food priorities and action. Now, a lot of us are quite curious about what's going on with UAE in terms of food system, food supply. As we all know, UAE is very vulnerable to supply disruptions and geopolitical risk. And the most challenge it is facing is really limited water and arable land. Water is a very, very big challenge. There's a lot of food waste for the country, and it's actually not growing much food, so it's very dependent on food importation and food importation, and that UAE has been steadily growing and food consumption has increased by 9%, and there's a preference for resource-intensive food like beef and dairy. As a response and trying to set as an example, UAE has developed a national food system pathways that reflected already through the revision of its NDC. The Ministry of Climate Change and Environment launched several initiatives with non-state actors, including a procurement initiative with farmers. UAE is also co-sponsoring or co-founder of Aim4C, driving an 8 billion innovative agriculture solution portfolio. And the Ministry of Climate Change and Agriculture and the Environment is developing innovative finance instruments. So within this backdrop, here's the pillars of our food system approach. Here's what you should expect when many of you will be on your way to engage with COP28 in Abu Dhabi. And we're very much looking forward to seeing so many of you engage with the COP processes this year. Hopefully you will see something that you have not seen before in COPs. But we have what we call a Pillar 1 approach, in which we're coming up hopefully from programs from state actors. And the biggest highlight for this would be a leaders' declaration on food system, agriculture, and climate action. And these, we hope, will be signed by 100 countries or 100 heads of states, in which countries commit to integrate food targets in NDCs and MAPs, and being able for countries and organizations to showcase initiatives that are supportive of transforming national food systems, such as actually the ones I've heard from my previous panelists from Nauru and Undersecretary Mercy from the Philippines. We have, of course, after the focus from state actors, we're also really focusing on non-state actors and highlighting initiatives from farmers, consumers, and agribusinesses groups. We're engaging with major food players, from farmers, agribusinesses, to traders, to commit to action in their specific context. For example, large-scale transformation initiative of key agricultural landscapes to regenerative agriculture. And encompassing these two actions from the state actors and the non-state actors, we're looking at innovation, in which there's a support for the global scaling platform for agri-innovation, and in which this platform will be looked at transferring technology to farmers, particularly small-scale producers in the global south. And we do this with support, but through supporting UAE support to Aim4C, which some of you might be aware, and the CGIAR group. And another enabler for both state actor initiatives and non-state actor initiatives would be funding. And so UAE is looking at mobilizing funding, existing funding, to support national transformation plans, support non-state actors, and investment in alignment with food systems transformation. So you could see there's actually 4 pillars, both 3 and 4 pillars are cross-cutting over both the state actors and non-state actor programs. We have consulted so many, and our partners, this is not just a product of UAE alone, but with so many partners, very active in both the food system and climate space, and we're really trying to marry both the food system and the climate space. You could see there's a lot of both development agencies, UN agencies, to philanthropy groups. I think what would be unique this year would be that Bezos, Rockefellers, Gates have all partnered with a lot of our initiatives. For Pillar 2, there's a lot of participation from the actual big CEOs of big corporations, hoping to support our landscape initiative. And Pillar 3, Pillar 3 is going to also be led by Nobel laureate Michael Kremer, who has helped develop vaccines for the Africa region, in cooperation with so many scientific organizations. And here we will be featuring several innovative ideas that's coming out. Pillar 4, which is looking at finance. So we're really looking at it very holistically, from policies through state actors to participation of non-state actors such as private sector and farmers groups. Innovation and now finance mechanism is being developed in cooperation with so many finance players in the globe. There's so many deliverables, not just, we all know that leaders' declarations are usually just 2-pagers in which heads of state sign over, but underneath this, in support of what the leaders' declaration would contain, would be several toolkit, for example, so that they would be able to implement what they have signed over into. Food and Climate National Action Toolkit, Guidance for Food Systems, several vertical indicators of how transformation can be done. And we've also tried to feature past presidencies, initiatives such as the Breakthrough Agenda of COP26, And the FAST initiative of COP27, one of the guiding principles of the UAE COP28 presidency is not to create new initiatives, but to provide acceleration and boosting of existing initiatives that are very well underway to being implemented. I just wanted to just briefly introduce this Food and Climate National Action Toolkit, which might be very relevant to some of my panelists speaking and the overview that Michael has shared. We're hoping to have guiding principles to enhance and implement ambitious NAPs, NDCs, and long-term strategies for food system transformation. We hope to show available tools for increasing ambition and fully functional NDCs and NAPs for food systems. Best practice examples I've heard from 2 countries, from Nauru and Philippines now. Best practice examples from countries that has integrated food system pathways and food system measures within these national climate frameworks. Also includes examples from underground projects like Scala of FAO, and then recommendations for alignment of national food system pathways with the climate policy framework. So this kind of toolkit will be attached as a supporting document or a supporting toolkit behind the heads of states leaders' declaration on food system and climate action, including one for agriculture. I would like to say this is in partnership with existing organizations who have eminent work on this, such as the FAO Scala Project, WWF, Global Alliance for the Future of Food, NDC Partnership, and FOLU. There are deliverables for Pillar 2. We're really looking to look at regenerative agriculture, other non-state actor initiatives, such as the Global Methane Hub, C40 for cities, agriculture breakthrough agenda. We hope to feature blue food, which is often an ignored part of the food system that has a huge climate impact and possible climate solutions. So the presidency hopes to give a boost to existing initiatives. There are so many deliverables for these innovation packages. That includes working with philanthropies like Gates Foundation, several donor countries, and looking at specific innovations, specific host country funding and means for deploying innovations at scale. What we wanted to emphasize is we don't want to launch something new, but really put a cohesion to existing innovation and provide ability to scale them up. Here is a brief view of our cross-cutting finance mechanism. We're hoping to look at finance support for National Food Systems Transition Partnership, pretty much patterned after the NDC partnership. We hope to have a pipeline development and funding for supporting projects coming out of the pipelines for identified 5 to 10 countries, which will be showcased at COP during the 2 weeks of COP. Looking at support for C innovation funding, blended finance vehicles, supply chain financing with the support of a lot of private sector partners, and advanced market commitment, creating a group of purchasers of high integrity carbon credits to purchase guarantees for future carbon credits from smallholders at the set price. So we're really hoping to showcase these innovation finance instruments across the 3 pillars that I have mentioned earlier. And that comprise our holistic view of food system climate action within the food system space. I would park it for now and hopefully hear from you back. So back to you, Michael, and thank you so much again for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Bakudo. It is so helpful to see this framework for accelerating climate action in food systems as we all look ahead and plan for COP28, and also what you envision as the key deliverables and outcomes leading into a landmark agreement at COP28. So thank you so much for sharing those with us. And so with that, we would now like to invite your perspectives, questions, and thoughts on these and other key issues related to the resilience of food systems in the region, including for discussion with our panel. So please raise your hand in the Zoom platform and we will call on you to share. Or if you prefer, please type your question or comment in the chat box and we will raise those to the panel as well. Our colleague Sophie will be monitoring the chat box for your thoughts and feedback. So with that, I'm going to keep my eyes out. If you have a thought you'd like to raise, please do raise your hand in the platform. I see that we do have a question from Dr. Norman, who is joining us, on how to prevent land conversion from agricultural use to urban use, and how to help farmers prepare for natural disasters. Just his question, general question about those things. If any of our panelists would like to jump in and comment on those, please feel free. And so if you see other questions or comments from our participants in the chat box, please raise your hand and jump in with those as well.
Yes, Mika, thank you for that. Actually, there's one comment from Dr. Simon Guerrera Cruz. It's not a question, but he raised a very important comment. And if Dr. Simon is in this session, we would like to welcome you to address your comments by yourself. I don't see his name anymore in the participant list. Let me just briefly rephrase what he mentioned. So he basically emphasized the importance of holistic adaptation approach in agriculture sector, and more particularly the importance of mitigation effort in agriculture sector, particularly in rice producing, that should go together with the adaptation effort.
Great, thank you, Sohi. I'd also like, this webinar, as we think ahead to the APAN Forum coming up in less than a month now, one thing we would like to share and kind of collaborate on are transformative actions that are occurring in the region or more broadly to strengthen the resilience of food systems. And so of all of our participants joining us today, if you have seen examples of transformative actions to strengthen food systems resilience in the region, such as those that our panelists have so gratefully shared with us, or others, that you are aware of, please share those. That would be very helpful for our thinking ahead to the APAN Forum and our discussion today, as well as any successes or challenges that you have encountered and or overcome in working to strengthen climate resilience in the region's food systems. So those are two key questions in particular we would very much welcome your thoughts on, and any other comments or questions that you may have. And if we don't have any, I would also invite our speakers, including Sridhar, hearing these things from our panelists related to the stock taking summit that you just returned from, and or our other panelists to share additional feedback as well. And or from Babu to share your perspectives on how this supports preparations for the APAN Forum coming up. Hong, please jump in. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I just want to address quickly the questions from Dr.
Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of land use, which is always the most difficult topic in climate change adaptation, as well as disaster risk reductions, as we have seen over the years. But there are now tools that are available to even allow the land use, the more like, foresight kind of land use planning, even at the community level. So in Laos or Cambodia, for example, FAO has been working with both the national government, Ministry of Agriculture, and communities to use the climate scenarios in the community-based kind of foresight planning for land use that allowed not only adaptations and risk reductions actions in agri-food systems, but also the mitigation actions. I think that bring the comment from Dr. Simon that, combining mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction, it's the way for us to deal with the multiple risks and the interlinkages of drivers of vulnerability and risks to the agri-food systems. Now, on the questions of how can we help people better prepare and respond to climate-related disasters. And here I think we have the Philippines. It's a champion in anticipatory action. So anticipatory action bring the advances in climate information forecast and early warning, linking it with kind of like predefined action that can be implemented before the disaster hit or before a slow onset disaster like drought get it peak. So it allows the communities to kind of not just only prepare better for the anticipated disasters, but also like mitigate the impacts. And our experience has shown that investment in anticipatory action result in between $2.5 to $7 saved from response. So I think those are also like the new few advances and technologies that have been developed over the last few years to help us with the transformative actions in agri-food system. So I hope I have addressed some of the questions. Back to you, Mikkel.
Thank you so much, Hong. That is very helpful. And I see, I'm going to ask Sridhar to jump in as well in a moment, but I also see another question from Noman, Dr. Noman, about whether there are any major plans to address food, water, energy nexus in climate change scenarios or in upcoming fora. And so Ms. Bakudo, you may want to jump in on that as well. But in the interim, I will turn it over to Sridhar, please, your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Very quickly, I just want to follow up on what Ms. Bakudo also said, that the closing session, the closing statement and the call for action of the Secretary General from the UNFSS +2 stock taking also said that the implementation of food system transformation pathways will align itself with continuous updates of the nationally determined contributions and the national adaptation plans. So clearly, climate action is very clearly integrated into food system transformation processes, and this will also be talked upon and reported upon in the successive stock taking moments. And just to mention that there will be such a stock taking every 2 years. So this was the first one that happened. And secondly, it also talks about the design and operationalization of the UNFCCC Loss and Damage Fund, the full capitalization of the GCF and the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agendas, food and agriculture for sustainable transformation, where FAO, as you remember, was the lead. So the high-level expert group report on non-state active commitments also provides guidance. So overall, you can see that all the discussions that came out of the previous COPs and which will also be taken forward by COP28 is already fully taken into account. So this will be an important part of food system transformation going forward. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sridhar. That is very good to hear and very much appreciate your perspectives on that. I see another question from Sukarit Naoji on how to integrate livestock, agriculture, and aquaculture production following ecosystem-based adaptation and adapting a circular economy approach in order to build resilience against extreme climatic events, saltwater intrusion, extreme heat, extreme rainfall. So any examples or thoughts about how to build that kind of integrated approach, livestock, agriculture, and aquaculture production following ecosystem-based approaches would be most welcome. Also, if any of our speakers have thoughts on that. And I might also ask Ms. Bakudo if you know of any plans related to how COP28 may seek to address the food, water, energy nexus, or any or all of those points, if that's something that may be considered in the food systems framework as well.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Definitely, we are considering that. And in fact, we are going to be opening, just to share a bit of the programming and event for COP28, we are going to be starting with the Leaders' Declaration on Food System and Climate Action. And we are going to end COP28 with Food Day, which actually includes Food, Water, and Agriculture Day. So we're really seeing the integration, we're really seeing the role of the food system, agriculture, and water. And we're hoping to highlight it at the end, bookending COP with these two very important topics, because we all need water and food for humanity's survival. So we're starting and we're ending with this and giving it quite an importance together, and how they are both an integrated element that needs to be seen together. Just a bit of a thought on integration of aquaculture and livestock and all this. I think Vietnam has such great examples of this. One of my favorite resilient practice would be rice shrimp farming, I would say, in which both rice and shrimp coexisting together as a form of a resilient approach to the impacts of climate change for the agriculture sector. Thank you, Michael.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Bakudo. And colleagues, thank you everyone for your thoughts, the comments that you shared in the chat box. As we are nearing the end of our time today, I would like to invite Hong, our host, to share some brief closing remarks and perhaps summarize any key points that you have heard based on this excellent discussion today and the insights shared by our panelists. So Hong, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Mikkel. I think it's going to be a very tough job to summarize the very rich discussion that we have, but just a few key takeaways from me, like clearly from the stock taking exercise the last week, we cannot afford more short-term response. Long-term transformative action of the agri-food system is to reconfigure our agri-food systems is the way to go. And we have not only highest political commitments as expressed at the stock-taking event, but we have also, seen the new knowledge, advances in terms of technologies and practices shared as a way for us to accelerate our transformative actions. And I think from the interventions of Undersecretary Subunbler and Madame Maria from the NORI, we can see the importance of having the national plan of actions very clear, whether that is a clear focus on sustainable productions and productivity growth, focusing on inclusive of women and others, local production to be less dependence on export, more resilience of the in food security in Nauru, or a very comprehensive, coherent 10-year strategic and directional action plans in the Philippines. Those are addressing the specific context of the countries, but are helping the countries on the right track in terms of transforming the agri-food system and achieving target. But even if we are not on track, it's fine because we are learning as we go. And it's also very encouraging to hear the COP28 presidency kind of landmark agreement, new initiative with the 4 pillars of state, non-state actors, initiatives, innovative tools, and deliverables with the, scaling up global platform, financial partners, and innovative financial mechanism to support the actions. So I think we are all set to continue having the agri-food system transformations in the upcoming SDG summit in the COP28. And of course, at the 8th APAN, all is going to help us together accelerate action towards greater resilience. I hope that captured the discussions. Thank you. Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hong. And I would like to again thank you, thank Ms. Cook, thank Undersecretary Sobia and Ms. Bakudo and Mr. Dharmapuri for your very insightful, helpful, guiding remarks for us today. It's such an honor and a pleasure to hear about the work that you are leading. And just to finally close our session today, I would like to welcome back Moza Harul, head of the APAN Secretariat, to provide final and closing remarks for the webinar as we look ahead to the upcoming APAN Forum. So Moza Harul, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. And I know that we are almost at the very end of it, and we are running a bit more the time that we have allocated. But first of all, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to all the speakers and the participants for sharing their insight as well as raising the key questions in the context of the food system resilience. I'd like to just mention a couple of things what I have heard in addition to what my colleague from FAO, Han, mentioned. From the countryside of the experiences, what I have heard that it is important to be inclusive. It is important to be nature positive production, and also important to aligning it and harmonization of the action. So that all brings together is basically gave me the impression what the COP28 presidency colleague mentioned about the systematic or the systemic change that we need, and we need to consider the whole food system as a whole. And that brings me the couple of questions raised by the participants related to the food, water, energy nexus, for an example. I think those are important elements that we need to think about when we are talking about the systemic change or taking the food system as a whole, what goes in there. So with that, I'd like to also mention that we'll be having remaining 3 webinars, and one of them will be beginning very soon, maybe less than 30 minutes from now. But I would like to really thank our FAO colleague and the team for very hard work and heavy lifting, pulling things together and organizing this webinar. So with that, thanks. I hope that many of participants who joined today will be joining the Asia Pacific Adaptation Forum in Incheon end of this month. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all and have a good day. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Moza Harul, and thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We look forward to continuing this discussion and seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikhail. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Colleagues.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.